show for all your latest UFC news and rumors. It's Brian Coyle. It's Sean Stanley. It's the TFM Live podcast. And it's now.
What's going on, everybody, and welcome to TFM Live, the official podcast of FullMountMMA.com. I am Brian Coyle. I am joined alongside Sean Stanley. And Sean, it's a little bit of a decompression phase, a little for the UFC. We're now a week past Conor McGregor's loss at UFC 196 and Holly Holm's loss, and Miesha Tate ascending to the championship level, and Nate Diaz getting paid and having a good time about it. So now this is kind of a good time to recollect. There's some news we got to get through this week, and something we'll start off the show with is something we kind of asked ourselves as a website. You can find out on the FullMountMMA.com. We talked about it a little bit last week. Georges St-Pierre, he was at UFC 196.
Yes, he was.
And Sean, he wasn't just there to watch it in person, correct?
I don't think so.
Yes. So it's pretty much seems to be he's going to fight at UFC 200 under the right circumstances. Now, we don't know what those circumstances are. We don't know the negotiations. Dana White's been pretty coy about it, and it seems like it's going to happen regardless. But we asked ourselves this question, and we had three different opinions. One from our mystery writer, TFM staff, who hopefully we will be able to reveal at some point or another during the time on the site.
He's the masked man X.
Oh yeah, he's one of the solid ones out there. Hopefully we can say who it is soon. But in any case, we talked about this. Who's the best opponent for GSP at UFC 200? And we had a variety of opinions. So since I'm already talking, I'll start. I want Condit. I want Carlos Condit so bad to fight Georges St-Pierre again. I love that fight so much. But I'm a Carlos Condit apologist, and I still think he should beat Robbie Lawler and blah, 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 blah. But Robbie Lawler's the fight here. GSP never lost the welterweight belt. He vacated it. Lawler's the welterweight champ. They've never fought against each other. It's an incredible clash of styles. The ruthless one will just come at GSP relentlessly. He can sprawl incredibly well, so we won't have a GSP Dan Hardy situation. As much as I love watching Dan Hardy fight, he got completely pretzel up during that one. And we get to see a main event level. I think you can headline UFC 200 with Georges St-Pierre and Robbie Lawler for the welterweight belt. You, on the other hand, want to run back a fight, or well, not run back, but run a fight that's people have wanted for 5 years or so. Explain.
Yeah, well, I just think with the nostalgia of Anderson Silva, GSP, I mean, look, to say GSP deserves a title shot, that's just, he hasn't been in the octagon in several years. And to put him in, I mean, that to me, that's a slap in the face. Well, could UFC do that? Most definitely. He's GSP. I can't say that he hasn't not earned that, but at the same time, recently, he hasn't earned that. You know, so for me, you had Anderson Silva, who looked better against Bisping.
Yes.
And you put him in with GSP here. And then you find out if GSP really, you know, is where he should be at. Then if he is, then you continue on your GSP talk, and then maybe he fights Lawler as long as Lawler is still a champion after that. But I don't think you put him in there with Lawler right away, because what if it's a 5, 10, 15-second fight? You don't know what you're getting with GSP. And I think with the nostalgia, Silva versus GSP, again, you can put that as maybe the co-main event at 200, you know, so then it's not the headliner. I mean, again, I don't know. I think people would pay to watch that, but I don't know if as many would pay to watch it now, 5 years too late. But, you know, I think you can put that as a and make it, you know, a nostalgia type main event that people would want to see.
I see where you're coming from. I get it. GSP Silva would be really fun. There's one thing, obviously, now going against it was we learned today that Anderson Silva will be fighting at UFC 198 in Curitiba, Brazil, against Uriah Hall in one of the weirdest fights kind of come together. We were talking kind of before the podcast about both are like in no man's land right now, and Uriah Hall, who's like everyone's been waiting for him to be that dude, because I mean he had that heart-stopping knockout during the Ultimate Fighter season 17, and it was like, oh my God, this guy can destroy anybody. And then he's had some flashes. I mean, of course, against Gegard Mousasi, that GIF I still will watch on occasion because it was nasty what he did with that knee. But then he went and lost to Robert Whittaker, and Whittaker dominated him, who's really good, by the way. Whittaker beat him on short notice, and Hall now gets a massive fight, a chance. I mean, I think this is kind of the UFC's way of saying, Uriah Hall, you got a shot to beat Anderson Silva. If you don't, we really won't care about you that much anymore.
Yeah, this is a chance where he can make a name for himself by beating Anderson Silva.
And I think this is a chance for Silva to go, like, all right, here's, like, if you still want to keep fighting, which apparently he really does, like, and he still got it. He still, like, he has a little, like, he's not the guy, but he can still be competitive. We saw that against Bisping.
He shows flashes at times, like he still wants it, but then there's also times where, you know, I mean, not that he takes it off. I mean, don't get me wrong, but that, you know, you start wondering too.
Yeah, he just toned it down. He wasn't as aggressive. He was tentative at times in that Bisping fight. So here, if he goes out and knocks out Uriah Hall, then it's like, okay, Silva can where is he's actually right in that middle of that middleweight spot. Like that's where he belongs. So I think your idea is a great idea, GSP Anderson Silva. The problem I have with the counter argument I would say to GSP's welterweight thing is the UFC was willing to put Conor McGregor against Robbie Lawler as the headliner for UFC 200 if he had beaten Nate Diaz at 170 pounds. So this title shot business of earning it or not earning it is completely out the window.
But also you could say, though, that Conor McGregor would, at that point, would have been the hottest name in MMA. So ultimately you're giving him, I mean, again, not that he should deserve a shot at that weight class, but you're just boosting up money sales. That's all you're doing there.
And I think GSP still has that kind of. He's not. I think McGregor's obviously bigger, which is incredible saying that, but this is the world we live in. I think GSP could drive that, and the last time we saw GSP, of course, was a while ago. But he did tear his ACL, which stunted his comeback. And if he wants to come back, it's got to be for the right fight. If the UFC wants to bite the bullet, and if it's a one-off fight for St-Pierre, it's not. You don't put him in that fight. If this is going to be, I am resuming my career, then you do put him in that fight. Because remember, Georges St-Pierre is only 34 years old, which is incredible.
Yeah.
Because it feels like he's been around forever.
I honestly thought he was older.
Yeah. Like, when you think of GSP, what, is he like 38? No, he's 34. He's like he missed out on a bunch of his prime the past couple years. He defended that welterweight belt 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times. That's incredible. I mean, I know that Johnny Hendricks fight was really close. And, I mean, the Matt Serra loss in the beginning of his career, which was very similar to kind of the way the Holly Holm Ronda Rousey thing went, because they wanted to build up GSP, and then Serra goes at UFC 69 and beats him in the first round. I think GSP has that, I don't know, that aura about him where
I think also that Serra fight kind of woke him up too.
Yes, for sure. And GSP is going to come out. If he's going to go full bore into this, he will. And if he's resuming his career, you put him against Lawler because that's the biggest fight. If you went down the UFC rankings at welterweight, for example, and you wanted to pick up an opponent for GSP at welterweight, disregarding Anderson Silva at this point, he's not going to fight Rory McDonald because Rory McDonald is his protege. That's not going to happen. Wonderboy Thompson versus GSP. If Wonderboy goes out and beats Rory, too quick of a turnaround, number one, but that doesn't get people going. Like, as much as Wonderboy is really awesome and one of the most fierce strikers we have in the UFC right now, and in MMA in general, Tyron Woodley, as much as Woodley's been getting pretty much thrown to the side during this entire thing, who I really feel bad for because he couldn't do anything about Hendricks not making weight. Is that going to get it? Condit St-Pierre to me is really cool, but I think that's just me as the kind of the ultra MMA fan here. Yeah, exactly. Like that's basically what it is, because I don't know, like you can't sell, you can sell that as the number 2 fight. You can't sell it as I think they want to sell GSP as a headliner for this. If we don't know if McGregor's fighting at UFC 200, we don't know that yet. I think he's going to, and I think he should fight Frankie Edgar, but we don't know that to be the case yet. So I think when you narrow everything down, unless he's going to fight somebody at middleweight, like I don't know, like a Vitor Belfort, like or a wide, I think Lawler's the fight. That's just me. Like,
no, you make a lot of sense there. I mean, and now since you've seen, with the news today, Silva, out of it. I mean, I guess maybe that's where they're leaning. I mean, obviously, the only 2 fights that would make sense to me, and I'm only looking at it from the standpoint of, for USC to make a fight, to make something meaningful out of GSP's return, to me would be, as you said, for a title, which would be against Lawler, or to take on Silva as a nostalgia type fight. And now Silva's out, so Lawler to me would be the next choice. But again, we're not the matchmakers, and it's going to be interesting to see. I mean, as these other fights are getting announced, it's almost kind of like we're watching the selection show, and you're just picking people off. Like, oh, okay, he's off the list now. Oh, okay, he's off the list, and you're just waiting to find out who the opponent's going to be.
Yeah, if it's not Lawler and it's not Silva, who is it? That's the big. That's what this boils down to.
Yeah,
and we don't know. Like Carlos Condit probably 3rd on that list. Nate Diaz, either one. That's probably 3 and 4 on that list.
Yeah.
Which I don't think Diaz's suspension comes up in time for that fight. Nate Diaz versus GSP, I think, would be really fun. But I don't know.
I wouldn't mind watching it. But
I would definitely watch that one. But it doesn't seem like that is going to be where this is going.
Yeah, I agree.
So, Lawler, Silva, Diaz, those are the names you're looking at for Georges St-Pierre's. At this point, we're assuming his return to the octagon for UFC 200. We don't know anything. We haven't been able to get anything out of anybody we've talked to, but that's what the return of the Rush will either be for the welterweight title in a fight for nostalgia purposes, or against a Diaz brother. That's what it kind of seems to, if you read the tea leaves a little bit there. And if you're also reading the tea leaves, Sean, I'm very excited about this. There's one state in the United States that does not allow mixed martial arts. That would be the great state of New York, which I spend most of my weekdays in every single day. And it seems like the tide may have turned, and you might get to see UFC fights, Bellator fights, World Series of Fighting, all that kind of stuff. Madison Square Garden, at Barclays Center. For all you Buffalo people out there, Albany, all these places in New York, it's going to happen because mixed martial arts, according to multiple reports, is going to be voted on and likely passed by the New York State Assembly by next week. So, Sean, the next time you journey up to this great white north, apparently, because we're getting snow on Sunday for no apparent reason, you could watch a mixed martial arts card probably by the fall in the state of New York. I know it doesn't really impact you right now, but to me, this is huge news.
No, yeah, it's huge for MMA fans in general. It's one of the things like that look, I'm a big wrestling fan, so to me, Madison Square Garden is the mecca, of pro wrestling, fighting type things. Vegas is kind of taken over as like the big hot spot for events. lately. But to me, everything always comes back. To me, as fighting wise, is Madison Square Garden. I mean, you always got your Vegas and you got your stars and your celebrities, but for me, I got the chance to go and kind of just see the Madison Square Garden. It was just like, wow, for me as a fight fan and a wrestling fan and things like that. So I think that's great, And then you have the Barclays Center, of course, you said, and all that. I mean, you got a whole new area of fights. And what would be interesting is to see is if UFC doesn't try to do a circuit.
Yeah.
You start hitting certain areas and moving up, kind of like wrestling. I mean, you won't have it like wrestling does where it's, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. You're not going to have like that. But, maybe the month of July, they'll do, the cards on the East Coast or something, So then on August, you'll get over to the West Coast and you'll see those fights. And it'll give different venues for fight fans to go and take a look at.
And make a great point. Before I kind of want to hit on this, I want to explain what exactly is going to happen. New York, the state Senate has always passed mixed martial arts for the past 7 years, but the New York State Assembly has never let it get to a vote. So it's never had a chance to even be voted on in the Assembly, and it has to go through the state Senate and state Assembly, as we all learned from all those Schoolhouse Rock videos with the bill on Capitol Hill. This is huge because Sheldon Silver, who used to be the speaker for the New York State Assembly, who had always shot down MMA, and I guess the money wasn't coming his way, which is the reason why he shut it down. He was also arrested for corruption and now will spend the rest of his life in jail.
Imagine that.
Great, because Carl Heastie, who is the new speaker, who didn't put it out there last year, and we all thought it had a real opportunity to actually happen. A spokesman, through a spokesman, he released a statement saying it will be voted on by early next week. The fact that this bill is coming to a vote means it's going to pass. I know that's not how government should work. They only vote on something if it's going to pass, because they don't want to look bad if it doesn't go to. Yeah, so they want to make themselves all look good by passing this bill, which, fine. I don't care at this point because we've been waiting way too long for mixed martial arts. It's been banned since 1997. The bill will then go to the governor's desk in the next couple of weeks. Andrew Cuomo has said on the record he supports it. It'd be great for the economy, more fights, more you can make the sport safer, all this kinds of stuff. He even included it in the state budget, which was even which if it wasn't its own bill, it would have gotten probably voted on as part of the budget anyway. But luckily, it wasn't getting picked apart at. So he'll sign it. Hopefully, it seems like everything's on track, and we could have a car it could be legal as early as September. The UFC, of course, through it appears. This was released through Newsday, has a date booked at Madison Square Garden in November. Dana White tweeted out a smiley face when all of this went down. So
does that mean he's happy?
I think that means he's happy.
Okay.
If you follow Dana on Twitter, who's an entertaining follow nonetheless, and he's cut down on completely eviscerating Twitter trolls.
He doesn't get his feelings don't get hurt as much anymore.
See, he's gotten better at it by just ignoring the completely dumb people instead of trying to eviscerate. And it did make him look bad because this is the president of the UFC just talking down to some morons. But I want to go back to your point about the circuit kind of thing and you mentioned wrestling, and of course all this fight stuff and all this wrestling stuff kind of intertwines. This whole thing that WWE did with the NXT card at the Barclays Center the night before they had SummerSlam, or all that. What is the UFC can do exactly what it did for UFC 189 and have a Fox Sports 1 card headlined by, I don't know, I mean, it was Edgar and Mendez. If you want to take a New York guy, for example, if you want to take Ali Quinto or Aljamain Sterling or Jean Vellante, and you want to put some of these guys who are New York fighters, put them headlining the card. If you want to go a bigger name, go for it. Fox Sports 1 card at the Barclays Center the Friday night. before the Saturday card, which could be John Jones, Anthony Johnson. I'm just spitballing here. Apologies to Daniel Cormier. John Jones, I think, is the guy there in that fight. John Jones, Anthony Johnson, Chris Weidman, if he's defending his title after beating Luke Rockhold or not. Like, this is the kind of thing you can do, and you have fight fans fly in because, I mean, it is a 45-minute train ride, the subway ride, from the heart of Manhattan to the Barclays Center, depending on how well the trains are running. So everything's always delayed in New York, so you always leave early.
No, I mean...
I'm letting people know now.
No,
but,
so
that's the kind of thing you can do.
Yeah, you're right there, but also it'll give them a chance, too, to, you know, like what WWE did was they used their development talent to wrestle because people are already in town for the big fight. So now the night before... It'll give them something to do, and then you can put some of the less. I mean, I think you main event and co-main event with some, you know, the bigger names, like you said, maybe the, you know, New York, you know, talent, things like that. But you also can put on your, and I know I'm just saying Sage Northcutts and things like that as your guys to start getting some of these guys seen. Your Saturday night before, you know, it's kind of like your, you know, the guys you know are going to possibly be something or something you can develop. And you start building them that way because now, I mean, it's good to running almost one card a week, but you're getting some of that lesser talent that's on the Fight Pass now. That look, not as we've noted many times on here, not many people have that Fight Pass, contrary to popular thoughts. Okay,
yes.
So yes, great, you're the king of Fight Pass, but that's not getting some of these guys noticed. And if you did this and you had that, like I said, the Barclays card, and you fill that up with some of your lesser name talent, and then you stack your main event one. Maybe you do it on Friday night, or you do it like you said Sunday night, or something like that. Then I think you will see, you'll start seeing guys that are getting up quicker, and moving up the card quicker now than what you see, because it's just. To me, you don't see these guys, and all of a sudden it's like, wait, where did this guy come from? And then they're like, oh, well, he's like been on Fight Pass for the last 3 fights, and you see him get up there, and by the time he's up there, he's already had like 6 fights, and then he gets up to there on his 6th fight, he's 5-0, and he gets killed, and you're like, really? This is what? Because I just think it'll give them an opportunity to get some of these guys on the main stage in front of more eyes than what they are in front of with the Fight Pass cards. I watched the last Fight Pass, and it was kind of embarrassing to watch, oh man, I almost said Nate Diaz. It wasn't. Sanchez and Miller fight in front of nobody.
Yeah. It was weird. Like, it was really, I mean, they were getting more money for it, but like having them fight and nobody is in the crowd.
Yeah, I mean,
it's really weird.
When you can hear the corner like clear as day telling them what to do, and you could hear the announcers almost echoing because it was just that quiet there. It was weird. It was like watching them spar.
Yeah, it was an odd situation. It's a shame for 2 guys, I mean, that are awesome fighters.
Yeah.
I mean, nightmare back in the day. That Diego Sanchez Clay Guida fight is still probably one of my favorite fights of all time. And it's a whole weird setup, but having this new region, if you want to do Newark one night, and if you want to do Newark on a Thursday, Barclays on a Friday, MSG on a Saturday, you can do it. You can do it just like you did the Cosmopolitan and then the MGM, like you can do all this stuff, and it opens up a whole bunch of new avenues for the UFC, and that's really, really exciting, especially for me, because that Garden card, I'm going. The Newark cards, it's really cool, and if I can get out there, I can go. The Garden, I'm going. That's because you mentioned it when you visited up here, and you said walking by Madison Square Garden, like, oh, this is the mecca of events, of fighting. Yeah. It is, and it hasn't been recently, which kind of sucks. And the Knicks are terrible, which also is bad, because people aren't going. They still sell out. I don't know how, but the Rangers. It's still fun to watch the hockey games there, and WWE does a great job. And that setup is so unique.
Yeah,
in the way they do things.
I mean, it's kind of weird now, because now they use the I think they should go back to that. Like they still do it when they do the pay-per-views, but when they do the Raws, they kind of put the Tron there, and I think that messes. I used to love that entrance when you could see them just coming out of the door area and just like, all right, this is what it's like.
Yeah. The only thing is, I just want to temper people's reactions. They won't I don't know how often they'll have Garden cards, because it is expensive to put on a show at Madison Square Garden. So much so sometimes that you take a loss when it comes to unions and stuff like that. That's why SummerSlam was at the Barclays Center. Mm-hmm. That's why you see a lot of WWE Raws, like the Raw before WrestleMania, is at Barclays in Brooklyn, not at Madison Square Garden. And they do live events there, but like you see it less and less. But the UFC can fight in the Garden, and they can make it a big deal, and they can make it profitable probably with all the pay-per-view stuff that they have. So it'll be very, very fun to watch. Okay, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we got some news to break down, and kind of piggybacking off of the Anderson Silva and Uriah Hall news. Another fight was announced for UFC 198. We have our first rumored fights for UFC 200, which is very interesting. Rafael dos Anjos has an idea of who he wants to fight at 200, but the UFC appears to have other plans. And Sean, I know you've been waiting with bated breath. I finally got to sit down and play UFC 2 on PlayStation 4. Retail copy, people. I was not given this by EA Sports. I spent my own hard-earned money and bought it in the heart of New York City, and that state tax, man, that is a killer amount at 8.5%. So I'm going to give my impressions. We'll have a full review on the site next week of the game, so stay tuned for that. So when we come back, we'll break down some news, go over UFC 2, and a bunch more. We come back on TFM Live, the official podcast of thefullmountmma.com.
For all your latest news and rumors of the UFC, go to thefullmountmma.com. Now back to the TFM Live podcast. Here's Brian Coyle and Sean Stanley.
And we're back here on TFM Live, the official podcast, thefullmountmma.com. Remember, you can find us online, obviously at the website I just mentioned, at The Full Mount on Twitter, at BCoyle11, at SS Sports Talk on Twitter for both of us. And Sean, let's get to some news here. Really quick, before we get into UFC 198 news, Renan Barão is moving up to 145 pounds, moving up to featherweight finally, after he's not been able to cut down to bantamweight, and so he's finally moving up after his losses to TJ Dillashaw, and he's fighting Jeremy Stephens at UFC Fight Night 88 in May, and that's the kind of fight where Stephens, he's got his back against the wall, he's lost 3 out of his last 4 fights, he throws some nasty punches. Of course, he's a weird record in the UFC. He's 11-11, including a knockout win over Rafael dos Anjos. So Stephens could throw. Barão's first dip into the featherweight division isn't too crazy. So this is according to MMA Fighting. So it should be a very fun fight there. It's about time Barão moved up.
It's only a matter of time, or I thought, or that he would, and it makes nothing but sense. So hopefully we'll see a more rejuvenated Barão.
Yes, for sure. And now the UFC 198 news. Of course, we talked about Anderson Silva and Uriah Hall is now official for UFC 198, and the Spider will be going back to his hometown of Curitiba, Brazil, which is pretty cool. But he's not the only one that will be fighting in their hometowns. We've got rumors of Cris Cyborg Justino fighting on that card, according to Ariel Helwani, reported on UFC Tonight on Wednesday. Cyborg fights under Zuffa with Invicta FC, and is their current featherweight champion at 145 pounds. This is very intriguing because she's been trying to get onto this card because she's from Curitiba. It's a big Brazil card. You look at some of the names that are on this card. Just Brazilian legends. You got Silva. You got the heavyweight champion Verdum headlining against Miocic. You got Jacare Souza, who's one of my favorite fighters personally to watch. You have Vitor Belfort. It's not TRT Vitor Belfort, but it's still Vitor Belfort. Damian Maia. And now Shogun Rua is fighting Corey Anderson, who will be beasting 25-8 in Brazil this time around. So this is a really cool thing. I think Cyborg is going to be able to get on this card, which is a game changer for the UFC.
Yeah, well, isn't it ultimately what they wanted to happen? I mean, you knew it was only a matter of time. It's just, only a matter of when she would be, making it only makes sense to put her on in her hometown, right?
Oh, for sure. And then the question now becomes, who does she fight? It's not Miesha Tate at 198, obviously. It's not Ronda Rousey, because that fight went out the window the moment that Holly Holm kicked her in the head. Is it Holly Holm at 145 or 140 in a catchweight?
Yeah.
I mean, the UFC does not have a featherweight division for women. So this would be at a catchweight, probably at 140.
I think you got to look at Holm. I was thinking, how about somebody you're. I don't know if it's a good.
Amanda Nunes
that's
is another option.
But I don't know if at a catchweight. I mean, I don't know. She just looks smaller, I guess, to me than what Holm looks. So I don't know if at a catchweight, again, and I know we see them, after they weigh in, they put on a little bit of weight and things like that. But I don't know, like Cyborg is just so much bigger than I guess what I see as Nunes. At least Holly Holm. Looks, and again, I'm going off of looks here. I like, muscle-wise, I'm looking at that. Now, Nunes can probably carry her own. I know she could take me out in a fight. I'm not even going to question that. But,
Juliana Pena could, too. And she's the next name on the list.
That's just what I'm as far as looking at it, it's, it looks like a mismatch on paper. And how many times have we said that, and they walk out and the person knocks them out in 15 seconds. So, I guess anybody really you could throw in there if you do a catch weight.
Kat Zingano?
That wouldn't be bad. Just to be as a I don't want to say a novelty fight, but ultimately that's what this is going to be. That's why I have a hard trouble. I think Holly Holm would be a good matchup, but then what if she wins it? If Cyborg wins it or Holm wins it, you almost ultimately vote that person to next in line.
It's a weird spot, and I think if Cyborg does fight, it won't be a top level opponent, and here's why: if Cyborg wins and beats Holly Holm's momentum is completely stunted. Well, not for reasons why, it's a catchweight; it shouldn't affect her.
Yeah,
it just will.
And then plus, the way, and as you're saying that, look what it does for Cyborg. It almost you have beat the one who's supposed to get who looks like they should get the next shot at a heavyweight title. You just, beat her. So technically you should be next in line to me. That's what I would think.
Mm-hmm. And the problem is she can't cut down to 135. I don't think it's possible.
No, it's going to have to be catchweights or they make a new division.
And are you deep enough to fill that?
I don't
is the
think
UFC deep
right
enough to
now,
fill
but I
145?
think ultimately you could probably get a few. I don't know how deep the division would be, and I think Cyborg may dominate the division. Looking at it right now, ultimately you could have people training in the works, or maybe there's fighters now that are there but just can't do anything because they don't have a weight class to fight like that. But I don't think you have too many competitors, I guess. So ultimately, I guess you're kind of answering the question right there that you can't do it because you don't have no fighters.
Yeah, and I look at it, I think Nunes is a great opponent for it because Nunes needs a big fight before she can get the big fight. And I think that could be it. And if Nunes loses her momentum, if you're the UFC, you're like, oh, okay. It doesn't kill us.
And ultimately,
Kat Zingano, I think, is the other option too. I think those. And I think
ultimately too is if Nunes looks good and loses, whatever. Maybe she takes her to a decision or something. You still have that to build on. Worst case scenario, she gets beaten. Again, I keep going back to 15 seconds. I don't know why. That seems like the magic word for me. But, in 15 seconds, then I think that ultimately stops the momentum. But if she has, the back and it's almost like, oh, she could win this. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, they pull it off and they lose. then you got stuff to build on. So I don't know. I mean, I think Nunes, as you say, is the right option.
Yeah, and I think that'd be Nunes. I think would jump at the chance like, oh, I'm fighting Cyborg. This is a big fight. Brazil. I mean, it just all kind of fits. It just all kind of fits together. But if I think having Holm go down there and fight, I think would be too quick of a turnaround. I think when I say too quick of a turnaround for fighters, that's me believing that. Like these fighters, they say they want to come back and fight. Like I always go back to what McGregor said at that press conference where everyone just kind of laughed it off as a joke. When he knocked Aldo unconscious, he said he needs at least a year to recover. And these fighters, I think, need more time to recover. When Uriah Hall beat Mousasi and immediately jumped at Whitaker, how did that work out? When Holly Holm immediately went from Rousey to Tate so quickly, how did that work out? Like in McGregor, it could be 4 fights in a year for him almost. Like it's like you need more time for the body to recover. I don't care who you are. It's just you got to take some time. So I think it's really cool that Cyborg will be fighting.
And not only the time to rest your body, but you got to train for your opponent as well. Yeah,
you need a big training camp
if you're refighting every month or 2 months because you got how many days. I know usually they say 45 days, no contact. I know that's usually not right. They usually do about 15 to 20, sometimes 25 depending on what happened. So right there, you're already down a month, 30 days. So you're almost, 2 months camp because the last month you don't really train as hard because you're cutting weight. So you have a 1 month camp to get ready for a Cyborg? Really?
Yeah. Yeah. And the problem, it's a catch-22 with fighters. If you do an 8-week training camp, then if you get hurt, everything goes back again. So it's a catch-22. But I think you're better off on this caution. I think that's the overwhelming, especially against an opponent like.
And then let me ask you a question too. What's Holmes' normal weight?
Holmes' probably normal weight is bantamweight. I think is a cut for her for sure. But in boxing, I have to go back and look. I think she fought around that weight. I'm just wondering
how much because we saw what happened with Conor. I mean,
yes.
Are they going to get Is it that much of a? Is it going to be as much as a issue? Like Conor went up in weight and things like that. So, things like that. I mean, how does she fight? Will she handle that weight? I mean, again, I understand it's not, as much as Conor. Conor went up almost, 20 pounds, 25 pounds. So you're not looking at that. But, it does take an effect on how a puncher throws punches. And everything else.
Yeah. Holly Holm fought, this is according to my quick internet research here, she was an undisputed welterweight champion, holder of belts from 140 pounds to 154 pounds.
Okay, so she's right around that weight then.
She's fought at that weight. She's, I think, the big fight for Cyborg, a couple fights into the UFC. I mean, Rousey's obviously the bigger one because of the back and forth, but she's the most realistic fight at that point. Also fighting on that card, like I mentioned, Shogun Rua against Corey Beeston 25-8 Anderson. I will continue to say his nickname because, again, it is the greatest one in the history of mixed martial arts. Shogun, this is weird because he was supposed to fight Rashad Evans, UFC Fight Night Tampa, and he picked up an injury, which was reportedly evaluated even by Lorenzo Fertitta at one point, who saw the outcome of, I think, an MRI. And they took him out of the fight against Sugar. And a month later, he's fighting on the UFC 198 card. So maybe it was kind of like, you know what, let's put you on the Brazil card anyway so we can make this a stacked card, which it really, really is right now, UFC 198.
Yeah, but isn't that's kind of rewarding people, isn't it? Just get out of the fight and then give them another fight a month later.
I think the UFC has changed its promotional tactics for UFC 198, kind of realizing you know what, let's make this big. because this is kind of on par already. Like, let's go down the list of UFC 198
WrestleMania
here.
at Brazil. This is UFC 200 in Brazil. UFC 198 is Brazil.
I think so. I really think so, because this is at a 42,000 seat soccer stadium. I'll give you some of the names on this card. You've got Kamaru Usman, who won the latest edition of the UFC fighter, right at the bottom of the card. Nate Marquardt, Thiago Santos, and Marquardt is fighting forever. Francisco Trinidaldo, who we most recently saw win. Warley Alvarez and Brian Bam Bam knock Sage Northcutt down, choke him out, Barberena. Rogerio Nogueira is fighting Patrick Cummings on this card. And that's pretty much your Fox Sports 1 kind of lineup. And when you get to the real card here, Damian Maia, Matt Brown, which is really fun. Shogun, Corey Anderson, Silva, Hall, Jacare Belfort, which is a hell of a middleweight fight. And then Verdun Miocic for the heavyweight championship, which the UFC would eventually obviously want to be their biggest title, because it is the heavyweights, and the heavyweights usually used to sell back in the boxing days. So they're making a move to make this the biggest card in the history of Brazil, and I think they're doing it pretty well, I might add. What do you think of Shogun being moved there? I mean, he's got the name. I don't know how good he is anymore, but he's definitely got the name power.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense from that standpoint if they're trying to make this that type of, card and things like that. But I just think that, these fighters are, you get removed from one fight, then you kind of get rewarded by going to a fight that ultimately could get you more money. I don't know if you want to start setting that precedent either.
Yeah, it's I think it's the UFC just like, you know what, we're gonna move you out of this anyway. So
was there ever an MRI?
It's not that
conspiracy theory, baby.
Conspiracy theories. I'm a fan of conspiracy theories, though I don't think there is one in this case at this point. Okay, but speaking of UFC 200, you got 2 fights already in the works, according to MMAfighting.com. Who they seem to break everything around there, and they got Helwani, so the guy does break a lot of news. And on UFC Tonight, he announced that Cain Velasquez, Travis Brown is in the works for UFC 200. This is an interesting fight, and not because it's like, oh, this is a crazy awesome fight, because Travis Brown is coming off a really poor performance against Matt Mitrione, who wasn't good enough in the UFC's eyes to even warrant getting another contract from them, who's now going to Bellator. And now, analytically speaking, Matt Mitrione never really moved the needle and wasn't very successful in the UFC. And Brown gets a major shot at Velasquez, who's coming off of back surgery after losing his title shot, essentially, because of injury. What do you think of this fight being on UFC 200?
I think it says more something else, and that's not even being looked at right now. To me, what it says is that Mr. Rousey, I think you're going to get Ronda Rousey on UFC 200. Yeah.
Really? I think I don't know how I know she put up the Instagram thing about the apple, like being able to bite in the apples now, but I still don't think we see her until September or October or November. I really don't. That's the way her schedule is. But you could be right. I think it's definitely a way to get Rousey there.
I think it's like, hey, here's an olive branch.
I think she'll be at the event.
I think it'll be more than being at the event. I think all this hogwash about I can finally bite into an apple. I don't think that's the first time she's bitten into an apple.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll mark the tape. We'll come back. If it's March 17th, it's St. Patrick's Day. Happy St. Patrick's Day to. Yeah. How do we not get into that? I'm Irish.
A little bit of me.
What the heck? I don't know who's more Irish when you look at our last names. So this is like. We'll come back to that at the end of the podcast. But I think it's a fun fight. I hope it's not the co-main. It's not the co-main event.
No way.
It can't be.
That's either the main event on Fox Sports 1 leading into the main event, or like the first or second fight of the main card.
So the fourth best, for lack of a better word, best fight on the card. Okay. And Velasquez, I think this is a great opportunity for him to just kind of get back in the swing of things, because he's been start, stop all over the place. And here's another fight. I don't know where this one's going to be landed. This sounds like a Fox Sports 1 free fight to me. Gegard Mousasi, Derek Brunson.
That's the fight pass main event.
See, this is why they pay you the big bucks, Sean. That's a kind of it kind of sounds. I don't think this can't be on the main card. And no offense to these guys. They're not going to
do something big with 200. I mean, if they don't want to do something big with 200, then these could be on the main card. Don't get me wrong. I think they have, they can be on a main card, but I just don't think with 200 being the card, these fights are on that main card. As I said, I think maybe those two fights are your Fox Sports 1 main event and your Fight Pass main event right there.
Fourth and fifth, yeah. I think, especially coming after the performance that Mousasi had against Dallas Leitis, and it was really, people were booing him. It wasn't like very entertaining. And Mousasi's not that kind of fighter. He kind of turned heel in the crowd after that too. He's wanted a bigger fight, but then again, you got knocked out by Uriah Hall, and all you did was beat Dallas Leitis after. So I think Brunson's a good fight for him. Brunson's an entertaining fighter. I don't know where this goes on the 200 card, like you mentioned, but we'll see where it gets marked down when the main events kind of come into picture a little bit more. Now, this was I didn't want to get into this completely, but where do you stand on McGregor's next opponent? Like, if they fight at 200, is Aldo the bigger sell, or is Edgar? We'll go full force into this kind of argument once whoever Conor's next fight is announced. But who's the easier sell? Because this was kind of flowing through all of the media this week.
It's Edgar.
What's it? Yeah,
I mean,
to me,
I just think
it's Edgar.
Whatever you want to say, Aldo either choked, Aldo came in, got it, whatever. I don't think that was, who Aldo is as a fighter, don't get me wrong. But at the same time, I don't see how you have this guy go through and fight all these fights only to get there to be told, oh, we're going to give this guy that got knocked out in 15 seconds to fight, even though you've done everything we've asked, waited on the sideline so he could move up and wait. I mean, what if he would have beaten Diaz? Then he would have to wait for him to fight Lawler. And then do you ever fight him? You might not ever fight him. And now here you go, all this time waiting to get McGregor, and now you got to step in and fight probably, I guess, Jose Aldo for the title now?
I really don't get, I just don't get the McGregor Aldo too.
I don't think he's earned it.
Unless
what do you
so
earn
quickly.
It by saying what? Oh, I'm glad you lost. Now your fairy tale's over. What? You got knocked out in 15 seconds.
And the argument, of course, against this is Aldo was champion for 10 years. Now, the argument against that is, was it the most competitive division for the last 10 years? Probably not. I mean, when you look at guys like Edgar and Mendez, they've been great. But, I mean, Cub Swanson's talented, but you haven't had...
But here's my thing, too. They offered him a fight with McGregor. He turned it down, which I would have, too, at that point, because, again, it would have been 12 days before a fight, and now you get beat the second time in a row. Mm-hmm. What I'm saying? If he did get beat, I'm not saying he would have gotten beat. I'm just saying, but if you lose that quickly, again, in the second fight, I don't think you ever get that chance.
Yeah. No, I think Edgar's the guy, and we'll delve more into it on the upcoming weeks, but I think Frankie's the guy. I'd love to see Aldo Holloway on that same card, wherever they fight, because I think that would be cool. But if Aldo wants to keep waiting, he might have to wait a really long time if he doesn't get this immediate fight with Conor. A guy who doesn't seem to be waiting too long for his next fight would be Rafael dos Anjos, who also reported on UFC Tonight, wants Nate Diaz or Robbie Lawler at UFC 200. Now, before we get too crazy, personally for me, dos Anjos Lawler, no, that doesn't work. It's not, to me, Dos Anjos hasn't earned the right to fight.
I just don't think it's a fight
point.
I'd want to see. It's not. I mean,
it doesn't, like, I don't think Dos Anjos is that much better than all the welterweights.
But see, this is kind of like the beast that's been created by the UFC, because they kind of let McGregor just call his shots. So now you got all these guys going to sit there and think they can call their shots.
And then they'll put them wherever they think their place is. So I don't think it's a bad thing. I mean, McGregor would have earned that title shot against Lawler? No. But would it have been the biggest fight? Absolutely. With Dos Anjos going for that fight? No, it's not the biggest fight in the world. It's not. It isn't. The other guy he wants to fight, Nate Diaz, I would love to see that fight. Because Diaz fighting him again to kind of like, there's a story there. And plus, I think that would be a really fun fight to just watch. Personally, if you put Diaz for the title, I mean, Diaz is a lightweight, so it makes a lot of sense. But the UFC reportedly has other plans for Rafael Dos Anjos, whether that's at UFC 200 or not. I pontificated on Twitter yesterday that those plans could include the winner of Khabib Nurmagomedov and Tony Ferguson in April, and I hope that's the case, because Tony Ferguson and Khabib are amazing and very talented fighters, and if it's not Nate Diaz, I think it's got to be whoever wins that fight, I think is the answer. Because if Khabib comes back after all these injuries and goes out and beats Ferguson, who said he would beat him by a Peruvian necktie in April, I think that's a definite fun people's main event, fight of the night kind of fight on 200 for sure. What do you think? What's the answer for Dos Anjos' next fight?
I agree.
It's not Conor either.
My thing is that it shouldn't be Conor. No, I agree 100% with that. But like, it makes you wonder what's going on with Diaz. I mean, you had all this buzz around him, and he's not even talked about. Not even talked about around UFC circles, as far as I've heard. I mean, not that I got my ear in every little hole and every on the ground everywhere, but it's weird. He just beat Conor McGregor, and if Conor McGregor would have beat him, it would have been nonstop talk. McGregor did this, McGregor did that. Diaz silenced McGregor, and you hear nothing.
I mean, he was on extra.
What is their plans with Diaz?
That makes a difference.
Oh, okay.
I don't know what their plans are.
I mean, that's my question, because I think that would solve the Dos Anjos thing, because personally, I agree with you. I think it should be Diaz. I think Diaz.
Yeah, I think Diaz is the next guy.
Yeah, to me, but I don't think UFC thinks that. That's what I'm trying to figure out.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a very intriguing thing here, because this is you can build off that. If they want to put do they want to push this guy? Like, I mean, how are they feeling? Like, do they feel very is it very risky dealing with the Diaz brothers? Like, Nate went out there and people were introduced to this guy, and it's like, oh, Nate Diaz, he's really cool. Like this, he's fighting for his hometown. He's got this I don't give a bleep attitude when it comes to this stuff. He wasn't thrown off by Conor. He's the kind of guy, he could be an entertaining fighter. I know personally, one of the guests that we've had on this podcast, Alex Dono, big fan of the Diaz brothers, all over Twitter.
Fan. Goodness gracious!
Holy shnikes!
He's probably got cutouts of them.
But they're fat heads on the wall. Yeah. But in all seriousness, they're marketable fighters. Of course, the argument made you made either. Is he the kind of guy that they want to push forward? They put him on Extra, they put him on SportsCenter. Is he a kind of guy who wants to talk? Does he wants to do all this stuff? It doesn't seem like he is, or he isn't. He doesn't know how to deal with it. That's part of the reason why I think it's been so quiet. But if you put Diaz and Dos Anjos, I think that's really fun. I think Eddie Alvarez and Showtime Pettis, that's whoever figures that whole thing, is that fight was being targeted for something. As well. when you look at Nurmagomedov and Ferguson, I think if it's not Diaz, he's one of those dudes, and just make it like this is going to be a balls to the wall badass fight that you'll get to see. And there's your third or second, depending on whatever that card's going to look like. It's your third championship fight or your second championship fight is for the lightweight belt. I think you have to somehow throw Donald Cerrone onto this card. I don't know where. I don't know where Cowboy will be, but I feel like 200 without Cowboy doesn't make any sense. Just going through the lightweights all over the place.
No, I think you got to have Cowboy just because I think Cowboy will fight anybody. So I think that would make the again, we look at.
Speaking of, how about Diaz?
Yeah, I mean, that could maybe that's what. But again, I just think that you waste Diaz beating McGregor. And I don't mean that badly. I just think that you had this fighter that beat, who used the notorious one, everybody thought was kind of unbeatable. He beats him, and now you have him fighting Donald Cerrone. I don't know. It doesn't, to me, get that, like, I just don't see it taking advantage of the awe and shock that you got when you saw what Diaz did.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, if they got Diaz and somebody in the works for the 200, I think you have to. Like, if Diaz doesn't want to fight, it would be weird to me. So I don't know what this whole situation is, but we'll get more clearance on it as we move forward, I guess. So, and we'll see what these plans are for Dos Anjos for 200, or I don't know if it's specifically for 200 or for the card after 200 or whatever you want to go, because he's a fun fighter to watch too. But like I said, lightweight's all over the place. You don't know what's going to happen with Eddie Alvarez. Showtime Pettis is fighting Edson Barbosa, Nurmagomedov and Ferguson in April. Things are all over the place. And for the final segment here, Sean, final thing we wanted to get to. Like I said early on, I've got UFC 2. I bought it on Tuesday night. Finally got to sit down and play it yesterday and today while watching a bit of March Madness. And props to the U for making it into the second round for you guys down there in Miami.
The Wichita State Arizona game right now to see who will be playing.
And now everyone knows exactly when we're recording, so I don't even have to say we're recording on a Thursday night, so this is perfect. And I'm glad you put all of your hard-earned work into our podcast and not paying attention to March Madness at all. But, I mean, I'm also watching the same game at the same time, so it's fine. It's completely fine. Today, I sunk my teeth into EA Sports UFC 2, the brand new video game from the Ultimate Fighting Championship, and EA Sports released on Xbox One and PlayStation 4. And I don't know if any other platforms, but those are the most predominant platforms it was released on. And I have to say, man, it's really, really fun. It's a fun game to play. They've nailed everything when it comes to presentation about what the UFC brings to their real cards. It's not as much canned commentary from Joe Rogan and Mike Goldberg. It's real reactionary commentary, it seems like, which is great. The fighters, the ultra realism and graphically that they bring to this game is absolutely insane. It's the best I've seen any sports game, for sure, including NBA 2K, Madden, all that stuff. And I'll have a full review for anybody who's thinking on the fence about buying this game. I don't know. A full review and impressions on our website next week, because I'm going to try to get through some of the modes and see and flesh out the entire game.
Have you been Tyson
yet? My impression, I have not been Tyson yet, because I didn't have the pre-order bonus, so I have to purchase Mike Tyson for because I was on the fence either. Like, do I get it? Do I not get it? But I mean, you have the ability to play as Mike Tyson, as you mentioned, Bruce Lee, Sakabara, Bas Rutten, and those are the unlockable fighters. But when you look at, you can fight as Chuck Liddell, you can fight as Rampage Jackson, you can fight as GSP. There's, I think, 250 fighters.
Do you get to make your own? Like, can I make a Sean Stanley?
You can definitely make a Sean Stanley. You can use EA Sports' game face as well to scan your face into the game.
I don't want to do
which
that.
I have yet, which I have yet to do. I think you might want to because the creative fighter templates, a little
I'd
dicey.
rather have that guy get beat than this mug.
Yeah, but the customizable aspects, as you just asked, it is as customizable as the UFC Reebok kits are. I'm just letting you know that right now.
Well,
you can't wear blue
they do
or
get the
orange.
names right, though, right? Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
the names are right on the side of the kit. Usually, for most fighters, you get a home and away, or like black white, essentially, kits, the nationalized kits, and then they have like a generic. They have a black and white kit for the nationalities, and then they have a generic black and white kit. So really expansive with the color palette here for the UFC. And then you also have the Champions kit, the black and gold, which looks good.
Well, that's only because everything else is black and white.
Yeah. The Bruce Buffer introductions, the UFC presentation, the crowd, the walkout songs for specific fighters, like the big-time fighters, like Anderson Silva's Ain't No Sunshine. You get that walkout. You get Ronda Rousey's Bad Reputation for specific fighters. So it kind of adds to the, oh, man, we're coming out for a fight. But
Wait,
I'll tell you what,
so
man,
if I make a Sean Stanley, I don't get a walkout?
Well, you can pick they have generic songs, they have songs and bits and pieces that they have from actual fighter walkouts, and then they have the soundtrack itself that you can probably pick from for walkout songs. I haven't figured out if you can put your own music into the game.
But now, do you get the walkouts, or are you part of the fights where you're already in the cage?
No, like you see the walkouts. And I'll try career mode is where I'll answer most of these questions. I haven't dabbed into it yet. So you'll get the full presentation. They'll do the like the old like kind of keyboard synthesizer music where they'll show both of the names and they'll show both of the pictures, and then they'll do a walkout for each guy. Or each fighter, and then they'll show the age, the height, the reach. Then they'll do that little thing that kind of flies. It's like a UFC fight. It's the perfect presentation. Like, I'd give the presentation a 10 out of 10 for sure. And I mean, no big John McCarthy in the game though as a referee. Disappointing.
I hope it's not the guy that
Herb
did the
Dean,
Shamrock
Yamasa.
Gracie fight.
No, he's not in the game. E. Levine, Herb Dean, Dan Migliotta,
They
and
didn't give McCarthy any royalties, huh? Nothing.
I guess not. Mario Yamasaki. There's and once you get in the cage, it's a fun game to play. I'll have full impressions. I don't want to go too like nitty gritty here because I mean we're gonna wrap up the podcast soon here, but the striking feels right. The grappling is much more easier to understand from the last game. Not a bunch of crazy like center stick right. Like you'll be able to maneuver. Becoming a submission artist, I have not perfected it in fights for sure. It's difficult to submit an opponent. It's easy to figure out the grappling and kind of sprawl your way out of things and move around. It's very difficult to master. And I think that's smart because that's what MMA is when it comes to the ground. It's very difficult to master, but it's easy to kind of take down defense. The striking feels perfect. Like, it really does. From the roundhouse kicks, the Muay Thai kicks, the clinch, to all this kinds of stuff, it really feels like you're in the midst of a fight. I mean, and all I can say is the opening of the game for anybody who buys it will be very interesting because it throws you right into a certain fight that may have won Fight of the Year from us last year, or from this year. The Fight of the Year from last year. It throws you right into it, so you kind of get a feel for the game. But yeah, it's really fun to play. For a UFC fan, I definitely recommend buying
just
it.
talked me into it.
I would say. Yeah, I definitely, if you're a UFC fan, you're an MMA fan, you should buy this game. If you're a casual fan, it's one of those games, doesn't look like it has too much depth to it, so if you're not going to be playing Edson Barbosa versus Paul Felder, or like you're going through some of the like bottom ranked fighters and they're just kind of not just playing as Conor versus Jose Aldo or John Jones versus Daniel Cormier. CM Punk is in the game, even though he hasn't fought yet. So you'll be able to play with Punk as a fighter before he actually fights.
Pretty good. He's going to get royalties before McCarthy.
Yeah, it's not bad. Different experience levels is there when you check that one out. And there also is an event mode, so you can put on your own pay-per-view. Essentially, you can put on
matchmaker.
Yeah, like Sean Shelby and Joe Silva. So you could put it all together in championship fights, 5-round fights, 3-round fights, all that kinds of crazy stuff you can do. But it's basically, if you enjoy fighting games and like a Street Fighter or like a Marvel vs. Capcom or anything like that, this is more akin to Fight Night, if you remember those boxing games, but with a lot more unpredictability, and it throws you right into the octagon. And I'll tell you, man, I'm playing a fight between Jones and Cormier today. You kind of feel like, oh, I got to move this way. Oh, I got to kick this way. Oh, I got to watch out. And it kind of puts you in that mindset, and it elevates your heart rate. You feel the crowd. You feel the environment. It throws you right into the realism of a UFC fight. And I got to say, it's something I definitely recommend for any UFC fan out there.
I'm going to go buy it. I'm going to go buy it now.
Yeah, I was going to say that I can.
Yeah, no, you sold it. You sold it very well.
Yeah, there you go. No royalties will be coming from EA Sports. Trust me, I bought the game on my own. It's a real retail copy, no code from any video game publishers or anything like that. So this is my own generic opinion on the subject. So that's it. That's the podcast, Sean. Happy St. Patrick's Day
to you.
I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed it in the traditional sense that we do enjoy St. Patrick's Day.
Not as much drinking as I probably should have, but it's all good. Had a podcast to do.
Cool. Same here. Yeah, we do, and you have March Madness to watch, apparently. So thank you guys for listening. Of course, you can find us online, thefullmountmma.com, at thefullmount on Twitter, at bcoyle11, at SS Sports Talk for Sean. We hope everyone enjoyed their St. Patrick's Day festivities, because whether you're Irish or not, you can still enjoy St. Patrick's Day. And if you haven't and you're working, enjoy the weekend. St. Patrick's Day, it extends out.
Just make sure your beer is
and we've got
green and cold.
Oh,
it's Ultra Weekend down here, by the way.
It's Ultra Weekend in Miami. Stay safe,
I don't leave.
It's
I don't leave the house.
Nuts. there are people 21 through 24. All descended upon Miami.
Yeah, they've bust in like 60,000 pounds of water.
Oh, man. I don't know why people would have to stay so hydrated besides being hot.
The humidity down here is terrible.
Yeah, for sure. And also enjoy the UFC Fight Night on Saturday. From Brisbane, I think that's how you say it. Is it Brisbane? Is it Brisbane? I don't know. I'm not Australian. Mark Hunt versus Frank Mir in just a fun fight. I got Mark Hunt in that one. Knockout.
You know, just for
Super Samoan
and everything else, I'm gonna go Frank Mir.
All right, and then Hector Lombard, after being a dude who was running through everyone outside of the UFC, and then coming into the UFC and not looking the killer part after losing to Tim Boetsch back at UFC 149. He's kind of just bounced around a little bit and being suspended after his fight against Josh Berkman for performance-enhancing drugs. This is the first time we'll see him. He goes up against Neil Magny. So it's interesting to see how Lombard does in a big spot, co-main event slot for him.
If he doesn't lay an egg.
It'll be fun. Yeah, down under. This will be a fun card. We'll be back next week. Usual time, late in the week, we'll be recording, and maybe we'll have more news about a lot of things regarding UFC 200, and we can start to kind of get into the rivalry of John Jones and Daniel Cormier, which looks to be getting a little bit bitter. I don't know how that would happen,
upgrade our viewing
Oh, it's gonna
our ratings,
explicit tag.
I mean,
We won't be saying it.
Or whatever that thing is. We're going to have to go to TV MA or Radio MA.
I think if we played any audio from that interview, absolutely, that they did with Joe Rogan. But we'll talk about that more next time. Thank you guys for listening. Again, fullmountmma.com for all of your mixed martial arts news and needs with full analysis of the Australia card, possibly GSP's next fight. We'll have another 3 and Out next week, which is a brand new feature we debuted, of course, this past Tuesday. So stay tuned for that and more. This has been TFM Live, the official podcast of the fullmountmma.com, and we're out.
The TFM Live podcast was brought to you by thefullmountmma.com. Check us out on Twitter at The Full Mount.